Well, welcome back everybody. I'm gonna do just a quick little update on the Ranger. I think last time we spoke, I was saying that I was still getting kind of high readings in terms of fuel trim, which I was. I think I had, it kind of reaching into like the 18% at idle, and then we'll go down as I drove, but it seems like as it warmed up, it'd kind of get worse and worse. I think in that time, I was curious because it hadn't passed smog. The monitor wasn't showing that it was passing for smog for the evap system. And so that was leading me to believe there's possibly a leak involved. Well, after that, I did drive it quite a bit on the freeway. It passed the monitor. So, and I did some looking through that. I did change some hoses in terms of the evap system. That looked like they're kind of crumbly, but yeah, there wasn't anything that the car was saying that there was a leak. And and then with the monitor passing, one of the things it does is it checks for leaks by creating a vacuum and then holding it and then seeing how long it takes to fill, if it holds a vacuum or not. And I guess it worked, which would mean that there's no leaks in the evap system. So that kind of crossed that off. Things that I had done up to that point, obviously, was the lower or the upper manifold gasket, or the lower and the upper. So I did both of those, and specifically that fuel rail gasket, which, looking back on it, I do believe was the air leak in terms of actually causing a code. Because I will say, up to that point, I have not gotten a code for lean, but it is pretty high. It was like in the 18%. I know it's not for the code, but I had not gotten a code for it running lean since I did that. I did do the smoke test, which, and I did it again, I think after that, kind of off camera, and I still couldn't find anything. I changed all of the sensors except for the mass airflow sensor to OEM. So the idle air control valve is a Motorcraft, throttle position sensor is a Motorcraft, the evap solenoid's a Motorcraft. So those have all been updated. I did replace the mass airflow sensor with the Duralast from AutoZone. So I was still kind of getting, it was still enriching quite a bit, especially at idle after it hadn't warmed up. And I did things like, change the thermostat and stuff like that. So it's a little bit cooler, thinking maybe it was running hot or something, which it wasn't. It was running just fine. But it was still kind of doing that. And then I came across an OEM 99 4.0 liter mass airflow sensor on eBay. Yeah, I know. But it was the real deal from what it looked like, a used car, probably some salvage yard somewhere. I ended up getting it. I think total was like $40. And I plugged it in, and it really kind of tipped me off on some things. And I will say this. I did vacuum test the car, the manifold. So I did buy a vacuum gauge, and at idle, I checked the vacuum. Going into the brake booster. Give it a little throttle here. This is it at idle. 21.5. And from what I was seeing is it was like maxed out on vacuum. So I think it was fluctuating between 22 inches of mercury, and it would fluctuate between like 21.5 and 22, which from what I was seeing is like 22 is kind of peak. That's sort of like what it like. I mean, that's kind of maxing it out. So it really had me skeptical that there was any sort of vacuum leak at all. Like I would think it would go down a little bit, you know. So and that's where I got the mass airflow sensor. And something really strange happened is that range of trim shrunk. So now as you drive, it's always around 10 to 11%. And then the short term kind of fluctuates. It goes between, like a 5% increase and down and stuff like that. And when it idles, it's always like at 14 to 15%. And the short terms are almost always negative, like just by a little bit. So it seems like the range is kind of in that like 12 to 14% all the time as you drive. And then the short terms kind of compensate for that. But that had me thinking, that seems very consistent, right? And then I finally looked back at a video when we looked at fuel pressure. And so looking at that, it held fuel pressure steady. And when you turn the key, like it held the pressure, but it was at 60 PSI. And I think it was about 60, maybe less, maybe like 59 to 60 or something like that. But it was about that. And then looking at the specs for the car, it's at least 65. I believe the spec's at least 65 for OEM spec. And I was thinking, oh, okay, I think we may be looking at an aftermarket fuel pump. And I knew it was aftermarket for a long time because the gas gauge, it works, but it's like a quarter tank off. So it doesn't start going down until like 100 miles. And then you have to fill it up at a half a tank because it's pretty much close to empty. Like it's less than a quarter tank, but it says half a tank. And that's actually where the fun problem for my grandpa started, thinking that the car was fine. It was actually out of gas. Aftermarket fuel pump. And so it got me thinking, okay, I don't think we're looking at an air leak. I do believe the gasket for the fuel rail, so you have the spacer and then the gasket on each side, I do believe that was an air leak because it probably was previously fixed, the lower intake manifold in the upper, and someone just did the spacer because that's what the pack comes with. So someone did that, which then caused an air leak. But what ended up happening, I don't know if he had a fuel pump go bad and he needed replaced or they're chasing, but they had a aftermarket mass airflow sensor. I did see that. It wasn't the same one because the Ford ones have like a cap over the screws that hold it in and you have to like drill it out. So they had like a brand new screw just for that one. So that means they drilled it out, and looking at it, it looks just like the Duralast. So I think they put a Duralast one in there. And so I have like 2 Duralast ones. Funny story, right? But so they have an aftermarket mass airflow sensor, and then they put an aftermarket fuel pump in, which had a lower PSI than what it was rated for. So they had a lot of things not going well for it. And then you just get a lean code and everybody says, oh, you have an air leak. So I do believe that the leak is fixed. And I do believe that it still is running lean because the fuel pressure is low. So I would venture to say, if you do that gasket for the fuel rail, so if you put the gasket on each side of the spacer there, and you're still getting problems, 2 things you need to look at. Do you have an OEM mass airflow sensor? Because if it's aftermarket, that really affected the numbers. That was crazy. I didn't realize, it's smooth now. Like it's fast and smooth with the OEM mass airflow sensor. And then 2, did you have a fuel pump replaced? And then they put what I consider an incorrect one in. It really should be at least 65 PSI. And for me, the big indicator is that the fuel level meter that's on there, the arm, is way off, like a good quarter tank off. So it really isn't designed for that tank. Just wanted to give you guys an update on where that was, and that's what I believe is going on with it. I will confirm over the summer. That seemed like that's when most of the problems really occurred, but at the same time, none of these fixes really happened until after the big heat of summer. So it's hard to say if summer was the cause or it's just I was driving it a lot, during the summer, and that's when all the problems occurred. We'll see. I mean, if it comes back up, I'll let you guys know. But as of right now, I do think if you have a Ford Ranger 4.0 liter with those lean codes on both banks, look at that gasket fuel for the fuel rail and for both sides of the spacer there. And that's probably where your leak's coming from. And then if you're still having issues, mass airflow sensor and fuel pump pressure. Check those out. And hopefully that helps anybody, because it took me a year to figure this stuff out, because everyone just says, oh, the elbow, the PCV valve hose elbow is busted. Mine wasn't. I even got a new one thinking maybe air's getting sucked in somewhere. Didn't make a lick of difference. I don't think that there's a single, vacuum leak on that engine. It is so smooth. But the fuel pressure is low, and probably, I want to say inconsistent, but it's probably low enough to affect it, where it's needing to make changes. And it's looking as if it's lean. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully, we can keep these Rangers lasting a long time, because they're pretty cool trucks. And, I'm having fun with wheel bearings right now. And I'll be showing you guys the vent door wasn't working. So I got a new motor for that. We'll put that in. I probably should repack the wheel bearings. So I don't know if that's going to get in this video. But I certainly need to drain the fluid for the transmission and put a new filter in. Just, to make, I think that's going to be the last thing we need to do to it. But, yeah, that's been my adventure with the Ranger so far, and it is driving wonderful. So, if we continue wrenching, continue watching. If not, then hopefully I have another video come out just showing a little bit of wrenching on the truck. So, hopefully that helps somebody. All right, thank you guys. All right, finally got it out. So here's the old one. I'm gonna turn it, so now it's all the way on cool. No movement whatsoever. Here is the new one. Turn it. You can feel it. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but see it moving. All right, let's throw it on the cool here, because I have it all the way on cool. So this motor is bad, or the old one was. Let me throw it back in.